young college girl was driving alone late at night on a California freeway, and something went terribly wrong. Investigators found several tiny clues, but none was more telling than a single gold fiber, so rare that it could only have come from one source. 20-year-old Kara Knott was a junior at San Diego State University. She was a budding environmentalist and track star who was studying to become a teacher.
I can't tell you that I heard one thing about Kara that you would not have wanted your own daughter to be like.
She ran, she helped animals, she worked at the zoo, she was just always active. And she had this boyfriend who was just, together they would have stopped traffic.
Over the Christmas holidays, Kara's boyfriend, Wayne Bautista, was sick with the flu. So Kara drove to Escondido, California to see him.
She called 2 or 3 times and asked me things about her nursing type things, It
was a dead end. Underneath it was dark and desolate. I've even gone down there as an officer and later as a supervisor to write reports and didn't stick around. It was an eerie location.
We commonly referred to that area as the tombs because of the way it appeared from underneath the roadway.
Underneath the main highway, hidden from view, was Kara's abandoned car. The driver's side window was opened halfway. The keys were still in the ignition, and Kara's purse was on the seat. Investigators from the San Diego Police Department searched the entire area. 70 feet below a nearby bridge, they discovered what appeared to be a woman's body. Kara's father, Sam, was at the scene, and he knew from the sheriff's reaction that the news was bad.
Sam walked over to the officers, looked them in the eye man to man, and said, "Did you find my daughter?" And the officers turned away and said, "Yes, we did. I'm sorry, she's dead." Sam's response to that has always stuck with me. What would a father say under those circumstances? Sam's response was, "I wish you could have known her. She was an angel."
The murder of 20-year-old Kara Knott was a complete mystery.
The motive wasn't obvious because there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for her to even be in that location.
During Kara's autopsy, the medical examiner found no signs of sexual assault. The cause of death was strangulation. There were ligature marks around her neck and a mysterious bruise on her face. The only evidence inside Kara's car was a receipt from a Chevron gas station, which was about 15 miles from the crime scene.
We went to that gas station, of course, and we talked to the people. They remembered her, and there was absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. She wasn't approached by anybody. She filled her car up, and she paid for it, and she left by herself.
On the bridge near Kara's body, investigators found 2 suspicious skid marks.
I was unsure whether they were braking skid or whether they were acceleration skid, but they were protected and measured very carefully and photographed extensively.
The distance between the marks was 53 inches, indicating a large vehicle. Since it appeared that Kara drove off the highway willingly, investigators believed there must have been a reason for her doing that. Who reenacted what they believed were Kara's last moments alive in the hope that someone had seen something and would come forward. And Rory Devine, a local news reporter, joined forces with Craig Pyer, a California highway patrolman, for a segment on driver safety.
Being a female, you could be raped, robbed if you're a male, all the way to where you could be killed.
During the ride-along, he said, if somebody should come up to your car and offer help, just ask them to call the CHP. Don't get out of your car and walk up the freeway, because once you get in the car with someone, you're at their mercy.
The first lead in the case came from numerous telephone calls to police responding to their pleas for help.
There was about 300 calls made in Crime Stopper. There was about 30 women had been stopped and been taken off down at Mercy Road, talked to, detained.
They all said that a California highway patrolman instructed them to drive to the same deserted location where Kara was murdered. Some said the patrolman sat in the passenger seat of their car and questioned them. Several said the questions were inappropriate and sexual in nature. The officer was 36-year-old Craig Pyer, a veteran on the force. Interestingly, this was the same patrolman who appeared on television telling the public what to do to remain safe.
He had done stories with the media for years, and he seemed so concerned. And he seemed so upset about the fact that this young woman had been killed. We both expressed how upset and how sad it was.
If there was a man who's more proud of being a CHP officer, I don't know that I've ever met him.
Craig Pyer was working the night Kara was murdered, but his logbook provided an alibi. It showed he was miles away from the crime scene writing a traffic ticket at 9 in his face.
He had scratches on his forehead. He had trauma to one arm. Man, it sounded like he'd been in a fight.
Pyer said he accidentally fell against a fence at the police barracks on the same night Kara was killed.
The fence was higher than the level of the blacktop that his car was parked on, and it was about 10 feet away. You know, in our eyes, he would have had to take a running leap to hit his face on the fence.
And a closer inspection of Pyer's logbook for the night of Kara's murder showed an erasure mark for the entry at 9:30, the suspected time frame of the murder.
What it meant to me was that to make it look like he had something going on during that period of time.
And I still didn't believe at this point that he could have possibly committed that crime.
Craig Pyer denied any involvement in Kara's murder. And he willingly turned over the uniform he was wearing the night Kara was killed. Interestingly, there was a gold-edged shoulder patch on the uniform, which criminalist John Sims examined with a polarized light microscope.
The visual appearance of those gold fibers from the highway patrol patch was so distinguishable and memorable that I immediately remembered that there was something in the Kara Knott clothing that I had seen that looked just like that.
The single gold fiber that Sims found on Kara's sweatshirt was microscopically consistent with the gold fibers from Craig Pyer's shoulder patch.
Now it's become a real sick, bad feeling. This was my first bout with high blood pressure.
But simply because fibers look the same doesn't mean they are the same. So investigators sent the gold fibers to forensic microscopist Skip Palahniuk. Under high magnification, Palahniuk discovered both fibers were made of rayon, but it was something unusual. The fibers had not been colored with a dye, but with a pigment, a relatively outdated process.
You hardly ever find rayon fibers or acetate rayon fibers that are pigmented anymore. It's just a process which simply isn't used.
Next, Palahniuk compared the color of the pigments in both fibers. A tiny piece of each fiber was placed in a solvent which separated the pigment from the fiber. The pigment granules from both fibers were then studied with a spectrophotometer. It sends light through the pigment to measure how much of it is absorbed and how much passes through.
It actually builds up a little chart that looks like a curve. And what you physically really do in it, and when you're comparing two fibers, is to compare these two curves.
The fiber from Kara's sweatshirt and those taken from Pyer's shoulder patch were not just similar, they were an exact match.
I hadn't seen fibers like that up to that point, and I haven't seen them since.
I produced 3 or 4 other jackets which the threads were compared with the patch that he wore, and they were different.
To see a piece of evidence that was, in my eyes, from the microscope's eyes, a physical link between the victim and the suspect in this case, it was a scary feeling, actually.
Purple fibers were found on Pyer's police boots and his gun. When these fibers were tested in the same way as the gold fibers, they were found to be an exact match with fibers from Kara's sweatpants.
We had a cross-transfer taking place. We had some of Kara Knott's physical clothing material on Craig Pyer. We had Craig Pyer's physical clothing material on Kara Knott. Not a lot, because this contact was what I would call basically a flash contact. It was quick and it was over almost immediately.
Investigators sprayed luminol in the trunk of Pyer's police cruiser and found nothing. But they noticed a small piece of yellow rope underneath the spare tire. Police asked forensic odontologist Skip Sperber to compare the rope from Pyer's police car to the ligature marks on Kara's neck.
On measuring the rope and finding there was a distance of 7/16 of an inch from the center of each coil to the next coil, and seeing the same distance on the coils on Miss Knott's neck, which are all 7/16 of an inch, that demonstrated to me that very likely that rope may have caused that injury.
Also, on Kara Knott's shoe, scientists found a tiny drop of blood.
And at the time of Ms. Knott's death, we were not using DNA with any great amount. And so at that time, we relied basically on blood type.
Tests revealed the blood was type AB, the rarest type in the United States. It also happened to be Officer Craig Pyre's blood type. 21 days after the murder of Kara Knott, Craig Pyre, a 13-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol, was charged with first-degree murder.
His exact statement was something very similar to, I'm not saying that I did this, and I didn't do this, but what would happen to me if I did do this?
I remember just being stunned, in shock. It was unbelievable. You know, you've got to be mistaken.
Craig Pyre was once considered one of the California Highway Patrol's finest.
He wrote a lot of tickets. He was considered a hot pencil. He'd answer the radio on the first call. You could count on him. His whole life was a highway patrol.
He would shine his badge, crease his pants, and that was his identity.